Someone's following my bus. She said it to a stranger covered in tattoos, a man her mother would have crossed the street to avoid, and then the doors closed and the bus drove away, and she was alone with her fear again. But Logan Ryder didn't go back inside. He stood there in the August heat, watching the black SUV ease past his garage like a shadow that had learned to drive. And something cold moved through him. Not anger, not yet, just the quiet, certain knowledge that he had seen this before. Not the car, not the girl, but the patience, the terrible, deliberate patience of a man who was waiting for the right moment. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happened next on that road outside Tucson, Arizona changed everything for everyone involved, and I promise you, you will not see the ending coming. Logan Ryder had been awake since 5. That wasn't unusual. Men like him, men who'd spent decades living half a breath from trouble, they tended to lose the ability to sleep past dawn somewhere around their late 30s. His body had just decided that sleep was a luxury, and luxury wasn't something it was accustomed to. He was on his second cup of black coffee, standing just inside the open bay door of his garage on Valencia Avenue, watching the morning light come in sideways off the pavement when the yellow school bus rolled to the stoplight. He didn't pay it much attention at first. The bus stopped at that light every morning at 7:10. You could set your watch by it. Community college kids mostly heading downtown. He'd noticed them the way you notice background noise, present, consistent, meaningless. But that morning, one of them noticed him back. She was standing near the front of the bus, close to the door. Young, early 20s maybe. Blonde hair, a backpack that looked too heavy for her frame, the kind of eyes that had been awake too long. She was looking out through the bus's narrow side window, and for a moment Logan thought she was just zoning out, staring at nothing the way people do when their mind is somewhere else entirely. Then he realized she wasn't staring at nothing. She was staring at him. And her face was wrong. Not wrong like confused, not wrong like annoyed. Wrong like scared. Like the kind of scared that had been building for a while and had finally run out of places to hide. Logan set his coffee down on the workbench. The light was still red. Then the bus door opened. Not all the way, just enough, and she leaned out, one hand gripping the door frame, and she said it so quietly he almost missed it over the sound of the engines. "Someone's following my bus." The light turned green. The bus driver, oblivious, pulled forward. The door closed. She was gone. Logan stood there for 3 full seconds without moving, just processing, just letting the weight of what she'd said settle into his chest the way cold water settles when you drink it too fast. Then he saw the black SUV. It came through the intersection exactly the way she'd described, not fast, not aggressive, not doing anything a traffic camera would flag, just following. Keeping a careful 2-car gap, patient, measured. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass, but Logan didn't need to see the face. He'd spent enough years reading situations rather than people to know what he was looking at. He knew what that kind of following looked like. He'd been on the wrong side of it once, a long time ago, and the memory didn't go away just because the years did. He picked up his phone. "Mason, you up?" A pause, rustling. The sound of someone who had been asleep and was choosing not to admit it. "What time is it?" 7:15. "I need your eyes on something. You and Travis if he's not on a job." Another pause shorter this time. Mason Cole had known Logan long enough to hear the difference between a casual call and a necessary one. This was necessary, and Mason had always been good at reading that distinction. "Give me 40 minutes. 20, Logan said and hung up. He spent those 20 minutes thinking. That was the part people never understood about Logan Ryder, the thinking. They saw the vest with the patch, the tattoos that started at his wrists and disappeared up under his collar, the jaw that looked like it had been hit more than once and had stopped caring, and they made their decisions. He was the thing you warned your kids about. He was the reason you locked your car. He was the chapter of someone else's cautionary tale. What they didn't see was the mind behind all of it. The mind that had run a functioning business for 19 years without a single failed inspection. The mind that had mediated more disputes between men with criminal records than most licensed attorneys ever would. The mind that kept a mental catalog of faces, patterns, behaviors, because in his world, the ability to read a situation before it went wrong Wasn't a skill, it was survival. And the situation he'd just read told him something that police reports and worried mothers and dismissive campus security guards had all missed. The girl on that bus was not imagining things. Chiang. Mason arrived in 18 minutes, which was as close to 20 as he ever got. Travis Boone showed up 90 seconds behind him on a motorcycle that sounded like a minor natural disaster, and Eric Dane called from a truck stop outside of Marana to say he'd be there by afternoon. The four of them stood in the garage with the door halfway up, coffee going cold in their hands, and Logan told them what he'd seen. He kept it short. Logan always kept things short. Excess words had never done him any favors. Young girl on the community college bus told me someone's been following her. Black SUV, no front plates, dark tint. Same vehicle, same route every morning for at least 2 weeks, according to her. She reported it to the school and to TD. Neither one did anything about it. Mason turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. How young? 20, maybe. Travis leaned against the tool rack with his arms crossed. And you got all that from what, 5 seconds at a red light? 4 seconds, Logan said, and I got it from her face. Travis looked at Mason. Mason looked at his coffee. Neither of them argued with that because both of them had learned over the years that Logan Ryder's instincts about people had a better batting average than most things they'd put their faith in. You don't even know her name, Eric said over the phone, still on speaker, on the workbench. I don't need to know her name, Logan said. I need to know if the vehicle comes back tomorrow morning. Silence on the line. Then Eric. I'll be there by noon. She came back before they expected her to. Bone, it was the same afternoon, just before 3 o'clock, and Logan was under a 94 Sportster when he heard the bell above the garage door jingle. He didn't get many walk-ins. Most of his clients called ahead. He slid out from under the frame, wiping his hands on a rag, and found a young woman standing just inside the bay backpack still on, looking like she'd had to talk herself into walking through the door at least a dozen times. Up close, she looked younger than he'd estimated, and more tired, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep. You're the guy from this morning, she said. It wasn't a question. Logan, he said. Emily. She shifted the backpack strap. Emily Carter. She didn't offer her hand and he didn't reach for it. They just stood there for a moment, two strangers with nothing in common except 4 seconds at a red light and whatever that had meant. I almost didn't come back, she said. I almost just kept going. I thought maybe you'd think I was crazy. Everyone else does. Logan pulled a shop stool from under the counter and set it in front of her without a word. She looked at it, then at him, then sat down. He leaned against the workbench across from her and crossed his arms. Tell me, he said. And she did. Yeah. It had started 3 weeks ago. She'd noticed the black SUV for the first time on a Tuesday parked across from the bus stop near her apartment complex on the south side. She hadn't thought anything of it. Why would she? A parked car is a parked car. But the next morning it was there again, and the morning after that. Then she noticed it wasn't just parked. It was moving when she moved. It never gets close, she said. That's the thing that freaks me out the most. It doesn't get close, it just stays. 2 cars back, 3 cars back, keeps pace like it's not in a hurry because it doesn't have to be. Logan said nothing. He let her talk. I told my resident advisor at school. She said to document it, which I did, and then I filed a report with campus security, and the guy at the desk looked at me like I was describing a dream. Then I called the police. She stopped, pressed her lips together. They sent someone to take a statement, a very patient, very polite officer who spent 15 minutes explaining to me why a car driving on public roads is not technically a crime. Did you get the plate? Logan asked. She pulled out her phone and showed him a photograph. Blurry, taken through the rear window of a moving bus, but readable if you knew what you were looking at. Logan studied it for a moment without touching the phone. You take this yourself. Leaned back and held the phone up like I was adjusting my hair. She gave a small, humorless smile. Felt like an idiot, but I needed something. That wasn't idiotic, Logan said. That was smart. She looked at him like she hadn't expected that. The police said it wasn't enough to... I'm not the police, Logan said. The garage was quiet for a moment. Just the tick of cooling metal and the distant sound of Valencia Avenue traffic. What are you going to do? Emily asked. Logan looked at the photograph on her phone one more time. Find out who it is, he said. Eric Dane had a talent for acquiring information that would have made certain government agencies nervous. He'd developed this talent over 20 years of driving long-haul routes across 11 states, during which time he had accumulated a network of contacts that included, among others, a woman who had worked in the records division of the Arizona Department of Motor Vehicles for 16 years and who owed Eric a favor she'd never fully paid back. By 6 o'clock that evening, Logan had a name: Daniel Voss, 39 years old, address in the Catalina foothills, the part of Tucson where the houses were big and the driveways were long and people were accustomed to having their privacy respected. No criminal record in Arizona, but Eric had dug further because Eric always dug further, and what he found in New Mexico and Nevada made the temperature in the garage drop several degrees despite the August heat outside. Two separate harassment complaints. Two different women, both in their early 20s, both involving prolonged surveillance following photographing learning routines. Both cases had reached the pre-trial stage before falling apart entirely, because in both cases the complainants had withdrawn from the proceedings before their day in court. One of them had moved to a different state. The other one, according to Eric's contact, had simply stopped responding to communications from the DA's office. Logan read the summary on his phone twice. Then he set the phone face down on the workbench and stood there with his hands flat on the metal surface for a long moment. Mason was watching him from across the garage. "You all right?" Mason asked. "No," Logan said, which was the first genuinely honest answer he'd given all day. Because what he was looking at wasn't a creep who'd made a bad decision. What he was looking at was a pattern, a practiced, deliberate, escalating pattern of behavior from a man who had done this before, had come close to consequences before, and had walked away before. A man who had learned through repetition that patience was his best protection, that if he waited long enough, the system would lose interest and the woman would lose her nerve, and he could simply start again somewhere new. The coldest part wasn't the history. The coldest part was knowing that Daniel Voss was not going to stop on his own, and the system that was supposed to stop him had already demonstrated twice that it wasn't going to. "We're not going to the police with this," Travis said. It wasn't a question. "We're going to give them something they can't ignore," Logan said. Mason set down his cup. "And how do we do that?" Logan looked at each of them in turn. Mason with his head shaved clean and his eyes steady. Travis with his arms still crossed, waiting. Eric's voice quiet on the speakerphone, listening. "We're going to let him finish what he started," Logan said, "and we're going to be there when he does." The silence that followed was the particular kind of silence that happens when four men who have been in difficult situations before all arrive at the same understanding simultaneously. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it was a certain one. He didn't tell Emily the plan that night. She didn't need it yet, and he didn't want to give her something new to be afraid of on top of everything she was already carrying. What he told her was simpler. "Go home, get some sleep. Take the same bus tomorrow. Don't change your routine." Yeah, she stood in the doorway of the garage with the evening heat coming in behind her, and she looked at him with those tired eyes that had clearly spent weeks searching for someone who would take her seriously. "You actually believe me," she said, not accusing, not relieved exactly, more like she was just stating a fact out loud for the first time to hear what it sounded like. "I believed you at the red light," Logan said. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something else, then closed it again. Then she nodded once, adjusted her backpack strap, and walked out into the evening. Logan watched her go. Then he turned back to his phone, to the name on the screen, to the two cases in two states that had fallen apart before justice could be served. Daniel Voss. Logan had spent a lifetime being the person that decent people crossed the street to avoid. He'd made his peace with that more or less. There were worse things than being misunderstood. There were worse things than being feared. But there were also things worse than men like Logan Ryder. And one of them was driving a black SUV through the streets of Tucson, patient as a predator, waiting for a 20-year-old nursing student to make one wrong turn. Logan picked up his phone. "Travis, tomorrow morning, Valencia and Ajo, 7 o'clock. Bring your gear." "Already planning on it," Travis said. Logan hung up, finished his coffee, and got back to work on the Sportster. He had a long night ahead of him. And in a few hours, so would Daniel Voss, though Voss didn't know that yet. The clock on the garage wall read 8:47 p.m. Outside, Tucson settled into its August night, hot and slow and indifferent. And somewhere in the Catalina foothills, a man in a blue polo shirt was probably already laying out his clothes for tomorrow morning. Logan tightened a bolt, set down his wrench, and waited. The next morning came fast. Logan hadn't slept more than 3 hours, and he wasn't pretending otherwise. He'd spent most of the night at his workbench, not working, just thinking, turning the same questions over and over like a mechanic checking a bolt he already knew was tight. The question wasn't whether Daniel Voss would show up. The question was how long this man had been doing this before Emily Carter had been brave enough to lean out of a bus door and say something to a stranger. That answer kept Logan up longer than anything else. He was standing outside with his coffee at 6:48 when Mason's bike came around the corner. Travis was 2 minutes behind him. Neither of them said good morning. They didn't need to. They just positioned themselves, Mason near the edge of the lot, Travis inside the bay, with a sight line to the street, and waited. At 7:09, Emily's bus came into view. At 7:11, the black SUV turned the corner 2 blocks back. Logan watched it the way you watch something you already knew was coming, but still hate to see confirmed. The SUV kept its distance. 2 cars back, steady speed, never accelerating, never braking, just maintaining the way a satellite maintains orbit effortlessly, automatically, like the math had already been done, and all it had to do was follow the equation. Mason walked over slowly and stood beside Logan without saying a word. "Same plate?" Logan asked quietly. "Same plate," Mason confirmed. They watched the SUV drift past the intersection and continue south the same direction as the bus. Travis came out of the bay, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "So it's real." "It was always real," Logan said. He said it without heat, just as a statement of fact. But there was something underneath it, a particular weariness that comes from being the first person in a long chain of people to take something seriously that should have been taken seriously by the second person, or the third, or certainly by the eighth. Emily had told at least 8 people before she told him. He'd counted while she was talking. 8 people. And not one of them had stood up the next morning at 7 o'clock to watch. She called him at 8:23, right after class started. He could hear she'd stepped into a hallway somewhere, voices in the background, lockers, the particular echoing quality of an institutional building. "It was there again," she said. "I know, I saw it." A pause. "You were watching." Mason and Travis, too. Another pause longer. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, not relieved, exactly more like a person who has been holding something very heavy, finally feeling someone else put a hand under the weight. "The school sent me an email this morning," she said, "from the Dean of Student Services. It said they reviewed my complaint and determined there was no actionable threat on campus property, and they consider the matter closed." Logan was quiet for a moment. "You still have that email?" "Yes." "Don't delete it," he said. "Save everything, every email, every report number, every name of every person you talk to. Write down dates and times. Everything." "Why?" "Because eventually somebody official is going to want to know why nobody helped you," Logan said. "And you're going to want to be able to show them exactly who didn't." She was quiet on the other end of the line for a moment, and Logan could hear her breathing slow and careful like someone trying not to cry in a school hallway. "Okay," she said finally. "Go to class," he said. "You're safe right now. Call me after." Bye. Washington Eric arrived at noon like he'd promised, pulling into the lot in a diesel pickup that looked like it had driven through several states without stopping, which it probably had. He was a big man, not tall exactly, but in a way that suggested his body had been doing physical work for so long, it had simply built itself around the effort. He had a beard going gray at the edges and a tattoo on his left forearm that said Nevada in letters that had blurred slightly with age. He climbed out of the truck and handed Logan a folded piece of paper before he even said hello. Logan unfolded it. It was a printed summary, 2 pages, single-spaced, the kind of document that looks informal, but contains information that was definitely not easy to get. Logan read it once fast, then read it again slow, and by the time he folded it back up, his jaw was set in a way that Mason recognized immediately. "Bad?" Mason asked. "Worse," Logan said. He laid it out for them plainly the way he always did. Daniel Voss, 39, Catalina Foothills address, clean record in Arizona. But New Mexico, 2019 harassment complaint filed by a 22-year-old graduate student. Prolonged surveillance over 6 weeks. She documented everything. Good case. Then 3 weeks before the trial date, she withdrew her complaint, transferred to a school in Oregon, and as far as anyone could tell, had not spoken publicly about Daniel Voss since. Nevada 2021. Different woman. 24 years old, working in property management. Same pattern following photographing, learning the routine. Case built, case filed, case collapsed. The woman in question had simply stopped responding to the DA's office entirely. Her last known communication with investigators was a voicemail where she said Eric's contact had written this down verbatim, "I just want it to stop. I just want him to stop looking for me." Travis had been leaning against the truck listening. When Logan finished, Travis pushed off the side panel and said very quietly, "She moved." "Apparently," Eric said. "So he ran her out of her own life," Travis said. Nobody answered that because there was no answer to it that didn't make something in your chest tighten up in a way that was hard to explain to someone who hadn't heard it. Okay, Logan set the folded paper down on the workbench. He's done this before and he's gotten better at it. Both previous cases, he was patient enough that the women burned out before the system did. He knows exactly how long people can sustain fear before they just give up and disappear. He looked at each of them. Emily Carter is not going to disappear. "How do you know?" Eric asked, not challenging, genuinely asking. "Because she leaned out of a moving bus door to tell a stranger," Logan said. "That's not someone who's about to give up." The second week was harder than the first. Logan had told Emily to keep her routine exactly the same, which meant getting on the same bus every morning and watching the same black SUV appear in the same mirror at the same time, day after day, knowing it was there. Knowing someone was behind that tinted glass watching her and having to sit with that knowledge for the entire 40-minute ride while pretending to read her textbook. Thus, she called Logan every evening. Sometimes it was just 10 minutes quick, debrief, confirm the sighting, confirm she was home, safe, done. Other nights she'd talk for an hour, and Logan would sit at his workbench and listen without interrupting, because he'd learned very quickly that what Emily Carter needed most in those moments wasn't advice. It was a person on the other end of the line who wasn't going to tell her she was overreacting. On Wednesday of the second week, she said something that stayed with him. "I keep thinking about those other women," she said. Logan had not told her about New Mexico and Nevada, but she'd done her own searching. Of course she had. She was a nursing student. She was trained to gather information, to look at a situation from multiple angles, to ask the questions other people skipped. "I found one of them online," Emily said. "Not by name. But I found a forum post from like 4 years ago describing exactly what I'm going through. Same car, same distance, same patience. And the person who wrote it, she said the scariest part wasn't being followed. She said the scariest part was when she realized he wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He was just waiting." Logan said nothing. "That's what I feel," Emily said. "Like he's not chasing me, like he's just waiting for me to make a mistake or run out of people to call." The line was quiet for a moment. "You haven't run out," Logan said. She laughed once, short and a little ragged. "I called a biker I'd never met before because nobody else would listen to me. That's pretty close to the bottom of my options list." "Maybe," Logan said. "But it worked out all right, didn't it?" She didn't answer that right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "Yeah," she said, "it did." Thursday brought the first real complication. Logan came out to the lot at 6:50 and found someone he hadn't invited standing next to Mason's bike. A woman in her late 40s, business clothes, the particular posture of someone who had spent years being taken seriously in rooms where that required effort. She introduced herself as Karen Valdez, assistant to the district supervisor at the Tucson Police Department's Southern Division, and she said she'd heard there were people conducting unauthorized surveillance of a private citizen's vehicle. Logan looked at her for a long moment. "Surveillance," he repeated. "There have been reports," she said carefully, "of a group of individuals monitoring traffic patterns on Valencia Avenue in what some residents are characterizing as an intimidating manner." "Some residents," Logan said. "I'm not here to make accusations," Valdez said. "I'm here to make sure everyone understands where the legal lines are." Logan crossed his arms. "Are those the same legal lines that stopped a black SUV from following a college girl for 3 weeks? Valdez's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. A small, careful recalibration. If a citizen has a valid complaint, she filed 4 complaints, Logan said. School campus security T, PD, in the dean's office. You want the dates and the names of the officers because I've got them. Valdez looked at him steadily. Mr. Ryder, I'm not doing anything illegal, Logan said. I'm standing in my own parking lot, drinking my own coffee, watching public roads. If that's intimidating, I'd love to know which city ordinance covers it. She held his gaze for another few seconds, then glanced at Mason, who was watching her with the particular stillness of a man who has been in far more intense standoffs than a parking lot conversation. Just be careful, she said finally. Always am, Logan said. She left. Logan watched her car pull out onto Valencia and drive north. Travis came up behind him. That a problem? Not yet, Logan said, but somebody told somebody we were out here. He thought about that for a moment, which means somebody connected to Voss has eyes on this street too. The 4 of them absorbed that in silence. He's not just patient, Eric said slowly. He's organized. Yeah, Logan said. That's what I was afraid of. Chumem. Bye. Friday morning, 9 days into their watch, Eric's contact came back with something new. Not about Voss's past, about his present. Specifically, Daniel Voss had 3 weeks prior hired a private investigator based in Phoenix. The PI's area of specialization, according to his own website, was individual background, research, and behavioral pattern analysis. He had billed Voss for 40 hours of work over 2 weeks. Logan read the summary twice. He'd been following Emily, but before that he'd paid someone to study her, learn her schedule, map her movements, figure out the gaps in her day when she was most isolated, most vulnerable, most likely to be alone without witnesses. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't obsession spiraling out of control. This was methodology. Logan set the paper down and called Emily immediately. She picked up on the second ring, which told him she'd been waiting for the phone to ring. Listen to me carefully, he said. Has anything changed in your routine in the last month? Anything at all? New shift at the diner, different bus stop, anything. A pause. Why, Jaime, just answer me, I started picking up a Friday night shift at the diner about 6 weeks ago to cover rent. Why, what, yeah. Which diner, she told him. Logan closed his eyes for half a second. The diner was 3 blocks from a bus stop, on a street with no street lights after 10 p.m. The walk from the late bus to her apartment complex took her past a parking structure with no cameras was on the east side. He knew that because he'd walked it himself 2 days ago, specifically to look. Emily, he said, keeping his voice level, you need to get someone to walk you home on Friday nights, starting this week. Logan, I'll send Mason. You can't just Emily, he said her name once quietly. He hired a private investigator to study your schedule. He knows about the diner. He knows about the Friday shift. The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that Logan checked his phone to make sure the call was still connected. Okay, she said finally. Her voice was steady, which surprised him. Or maybe it didn't. He was getting used to being surprised by her steadiness. Okay, send Mason. Mason walked Emily home from the diner that Friday and the Friday after that, and he didn't complain once, which was not entirely in character for a man who had strong opinions about how he spent his Friday nights. But something about the situation had gotten under his skin too. Logan had noticed it the way Mason watched the street when they were out, the particular attention he paid, when Emily's bus came through in the mornings, the way he'd started showing up at the garage earlier than necessary. One afternoon, Logan found Mason sitting alone in the bay with the radio off, just sitting there with his hands folded and his eyes on the middle distance. You got something to say, Logan asked. Mason looked up. My sister, he said, when she was in college, different guy, different city, but she called me and I told her she was probably just stressed. He stopped, started again. I told her she was probably just stressed. Logan sat down on the stool across from him. What happened? Nothing, Mason said. He moved on eventually, found somebody else to fixate on. She was lucky. He paused. She told me years later that the worst part wasn't being scared. The worst part was calling her big brother and having him tell her it wasn't real. The garage was quiet. That's why you're here, Logan said. It wasn't a question. Mason nodded once. That's why I'm here. So on the 11th day, Logan finally told Emily what Eric had found all of it. The two previous cases, the women who had vanished before trial, the private investigator, the methodology. He sat across from her at the same stool in the garage, the same way they'd sat the first afternoon, and he laid it out the same way he laid everything out, straight, plain, no decoration. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat very still for a moment. Then she said, "So this is what he does?" "Yes." "And the women before me ran," Logan said, "or went quiet, or both. Because nobody helped them. Because the system didn't help them," Logan corrected carefully. "People tried, but the system needed a crime already in progress before it would move." Emily was quiet. Then, "I'm not running." "I know. And I'm not going quiet." "I know that too," Logan said. She looked at him across the work fence. "So what do we do?" Logan had been thinking about this for 11 days. He turned it over from every angle, checked every problem, stress-tested every variable. The answer was the same every time. The only way to stop a man who was patient enough to outlast the system was to give the system something it couldn't postpone, couldn't file away, couldn't lose interest in before trial. They needed Daniel Voss to step across the line himself, fully, visibly, undeniably, in a way that was documented, witnessed, and impossible to quietly make disappear. They needed to show the predator exactly what he thought was prey. "We give him what he's been waiting for," Logan said. Emily's eyes didn't waver. "A mistake." "His," Logan said, "not yours." She sat with that for a moment, then she nodded. Outside, a car moved past on Valencia Avenue in the late afternoon heat. And somewhere in the Catalina foothills, Daniel Voss was probably already making his plans for the following morning. He just didn't know that Logan Ryder was making plans too. The plan took 3 days to build and about 45 seconds to almost fall apart. Logan had laid it out on a Wednesday evening. The four of them gathered in the back of the garage with the bay door down and the radio off. He'd drawn nothing written. Nothing, just talked the way he always did when something mattered enough to require precision. Maps were for people who needed reminding. These four men had been moving through difficult terrain, literal and otherwise, for long enough that they carried the geography in their heads. And the idea was straightforward in concept, which was the only kind of idea Logan trusted. Straightforward in concept, careful in execution, no room for improvisation once it started moving. There was a stretch of road about 4 miles outside Tucson's southern city limits, a connector route that the community college bus used on Thursdays when the main corridor was backed up due to the construction staging yard near Ajo Way. Emily had mentioned it 2 weeks ago, almost as an aside. Sometimes the bus takes the long way on Thursdays. I don't know why, it just does. And Logan had filed it away the way he filed everything, quietly, without indicating that he'd noticed. And the road ran through open desert for about 1.5 miles before reconnecting with the surface streets. Limited turnoffs. Minimal traffic early in the morning. A county road maintenance crew had been working a section of it every Thursday for the past month, which meant the bus slowed down, sometimes stopped, sometimes sat for 3 to 5 minutes while the crew cleared equipment from the shoulder. 3 to 5 minutes. That was the window. If Voss was going to make a move, if the pattern that Logan had been reading for 2 weeks was building towards something, that stretch of road on a Thursday morning, with the bus stopped and the crew distracted and no other vehicles in sight, was exactly the kind of opportunity a methodical, patient man would have been working toward. "We don't know he's going to move," Mason said. "No," Logan agreed, "we don't. So we might be setting all this up, and he just sits 2 cars back, same as always." "Might be. And then what?" "Then we do it again the following Thursday," Logan said, "and the one after that if we have to. But my read is he doesn't wait much longer. He's been at this for going on 4 weeks now. The previous cases both moved to action around week 4 or 5. Eric was quiet for a moment. "You've been timing it against the prior cases." "Yes." Another silence. "That's cold," Travis said. Not critically, just observationally, the way a man acknowledges precision when he sees it. "That's necessary," Logan said. He told Emily on Thursday morning, 2 hours before the bus. He'd thought carefully about when and how much to tell her, and he'd landed on the same answer every time. Everything and now. She was not a person you kept in the dark for her own protection. He'd understood that within the first 10 minutes of knowing her. Keeping Emily Carter in the dark didn't protect her. It just meant she'd be surprised at the worst possible moment. And surprise in a tight situation cost you the 2 seconds that sometimes made all the difference. Oh, so he called her at 5:30 a.m. when he knew she'd be awake because she always woke at 5 for her opening shift preparation, even on days she didn't have an opening shift. She picked up immediately. "Today," she said before he could say anything. Probably, probably. If his pattern holds and my read is right, I've been wrong before. But you don't think you're wrong now?" "No," Logan said. "I don't." She breathed in slowly. He could hear it deliberate, the kind of breath you take when you're deciding whether to be afraid or not, and you choose not, at least for the moment. "What do I do?" she asked. "You get on the bus," he said. "You sit where you always sit. You don't look out the back window more than you normally would. You don't act different. You just ride. And when the bus stops on the road, you stay in your seat," Logan said. "Whatever happens outside, you stay in your seat. You don't move. You don't open the window. You don't try to help. You just stay put." What if, Emily, what if something goes wrong? Logan thought about how to answer that. He thought about the honest answer, which was that something could always go wrong, and preparation was the only real response to that reality. He thought about the reassuring answer, which would have been a partial lie, and she would have heard it as one. He went with the true thing. "I've got Mason on the bus with you," he said. A pause. "What?" "He got on 3 stops before yours. Sat in the back, blue jacket cap. You probably didn't notice him." Another pause longer. Then, "That he's already on the bus. Has been for 20 minutes. She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something else entirely. "You planned that without telling me." "I planned it in case you said no," Logan said. "I wasn't going to leave you on that bus without someone who could move if things moved fast." She was quiet for a moment, then quietly, "Thank you." "Go back to looking at your phone," Logan said. "Normal." The maintenance crew was in position at 7:02 a.m. Ostone, they were real. Logan had checked and they were genuinely scheduled, genuinely working a section of road surface that had been logged with the county 3 weeks prior. He hadn't arranged them. He hadn't needed to. Sometimes the universe cooperated, and when it did, the only correct response was to be ready. Logan, Travis, and Eric were positioned on the unpaved access road that ran parallel to the county route behind a ridge of high desert scrub that blocked sightlines from the main road in both directions. They had been there since 6:30, engines off, not talking, each of them running through whatever private preparation they did before something started. Travis was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife, which was what he always did when he was waiting on something that mattered. Eric was reading something on his phone which he wasn't actually reading. Logan was sitting completely still, which was what he did. At 7:08, Logan's phone buzzed and Mason, one word bus, stopped. Logan's hand went to his ignition. 30 seconds. Another buzz, SUV stopped behind. 45 seconds. Then door opening. Logan hit the ignition. A chunk. The Harley came to life under him with a particular sound that never failed to mean something, not just to the riders, but to anyone within a quarter mile who heard it, which was everyone. 3 engines behind him, Travis and Eric, and the 4th bike, Mason had asked a club associate to ride out and leave at the access point the night before. They came off the access road at speed and hit the county road in a line, and the sound of 4 Harley-Davidson engines coming out of nowhere in the desert silence was, Logan knew from long experience, one of the most arresting sounds a human being could process. It didn't matter who you were, where you'd grown up, what your relationship to motorcycles was. Your head turned, your body stopped. Every time. Daniel Voss's body stopped. Whoa, he had been out of the SUV. That was the detail that confirmed everything Logan had suspected, because getting out of the vehicle was the line. A man who was curious drove past. A man who was lost pulled over and looked at his phone. A man who was following pulled up behind a stopped bus and stayed in his car. That was still deniable, still explainable, still the behavior of someone who understood where the legal line was and was careful to stay just behind it. But getting out of the car meant something else entirely. Voss was maybe 15 feet from the rear of the bus when the bikes came around the curve, and the look on his face when he turned, Logan caught it in the first full second before anything else happened, was not the look of a man surprised by motorcycles. It was the look of a man who had just realized that the thing he'd been hunting had been watching him back. Logan brought his bike around in a wide arc that cut off Voss's path back to his driver's door without technically blocking the road, and the other three bikes fanned out behind him in the loose, instinctive formation that came from years of riding together. No one had planned the formation. They didn't need to. Some things just happened right. Voss stood there between his car and the bus and looked at four Hell's Angels who had just materialized out of the Arizona desert, and he did not move. Logan cut his engine. One by one, Travis and Eric followed. The silence that came down after four Harley engines went quiet was enormous. Nobody touched him. That was the first thing Logan had been clear about the night they'd made the plan. Nobody touches him. Nobody threatens him. Nobody says a word that a recording device couldn't play in a courtroom without hurting their case. Because the goal was not to hurt Daniel Voss. The goal was to make sure Daniel Voss could not hurt anyone else, and those two things required completely different approaches. Logan climbed off his bike slowly, the way a man climbs off when he has nowhere particular to be, and walked toward Voss at the unhurried pace of someone who has already decided how this conversation goes. Voss was still standing in the same spot. He hadn't run. Logan had considered whether he would run and decided he probably wouldn't because running was not in the behavioral profile of a man who operated the way Voss operated. Running was panic. Voss didn't panic, he calculated. Right now, he was calculating. Logan stopped about 6 feet away and looked at him the way he looked at engines that were giving him trouble diagnostically, patiently, without particular emotion. Daniel Voss, Logan said. The name landing out of nowhere like that. The fact that Logan knew it did something to Voss's face that all his calculation couldn't quite contain. A small fracture. Just for a second. Then the composure came back. I don't know who you are, Voss said. His voice was controlled even. He was a man accustomed to controlling his voice. That's all right, Logan said. I know who you are. I'm just... Voss gestured vaguely toward the bus. I saw the bus stopped. I pulled over. You got out of your car, Logan said. I was going to see if everything was. Daniel, Logan said the name once flat. I've got 19 days of photographs. Your plate, your vehicle, the timestamp, the GPS coordinates. I've got your phone records showing the route you drive every morning. I've got billing records from the private investigator you hired in Phoenix. He paused. Let that register. I've got the case files from New Mexico and Nevada. The composure didn't crack this time. It shattered. It wasn't dramatic. Voss didn't stagger, didn't shout, didn't do any of the things people did in movies when they were caught. What happened was subtler and in some ways more total. His shoulders dropped about an inch. His chin came down slightly. The particular erectness that had been holding him together since the moment the bikes appeared, that just went. I don't know what you think I think you've done this before, Logan said quietly. I think you know exactly how to do this without technically breaking a law until you're ready to. I think you've been very patient and very careful, and I think you believe that patience and care always protect you. That eventually the woman runs or goes quiet or disappears. He paused. She didn't disappear. Voss said nothing. She found somebody who listened, Logan said. That's the only difference between her and the others. Somewhere behind Logan, a phone was recording. Eric had been recording since the moment they stopped. Clean audio, no interruptions the entire conversation. That had also been part of the plan. The bus door opened. Mason stepped down, which Logan had not planned, and he felt the small spike of tension that came with an unplanned variable. But Mason simply walked to Logan's left side and stopped arms at his sides and did not speak. He was there as a fact, not a threat. Just another set of eyes. And then the bus door opened a second time. Emily stepped down. Logan had told her to stay in her seat. He had been very specific about that, and he understood the moment he saw her face that she had made a different decision, not out of recklessness, not out of the inability to follow instructions, but out of the very particular and human need to look at the thing that had been hunting her and let it see her looking back. She walked around Mason and stood about 10 feet from Voss, and she looked at him. Just looked, for Voss could not hold her gaze. He looked away first, then down. And something about that, the predator, unable to hold the eye of the woman he'd spent a month treating as prey, changed the entire weight of the moment. Logan felt it. Mason felt it. Even Travis, who was still on his bike 20 feet back, felt it because afterward he said it was the moment the whole thing turned from a confrontation into a verdict. "You knew my schedule," Emily said. Her voice didn't shake. "You paid someone to learn it. You knew when I was alone. You knew the route. You knew the diner." She stopped. "You thought you knew everything." Voss said nothing. "You didn't know about them," she said. Tum. On the county sheriff's deputies arrived 11 minutes and 40 seconds after Logan's phone call, which he'd made from the access road while Travis and Eric were still in position. He'd given a calm, detailed report, vehicle description, plate number, precise location, nature of the situation, and he'd done it in the tone of a man filing a maintenance request, because the calm voice got people moving faster than the urgent one, a lesson he'd learned from a dispatcher he'd known 20 years ago. 2 patrol units, 4 deputies. They came in without sirens, which told Logan someone senior had made a decision about how to approach this. Voss was still standing in the same spot when they arrived. He hadn't moved, hadn't attempted to get back in his vehicle, hadn't said anything further after Emily had stopped speaking. He looked like a man who was already somewhere else in his head, already calculating, already thinking forward, already wondering which version of events he was going to present to which people. Logan handed the lead deputy a sealed envelope he had prepared 2 days ago. Inside was a printed summary of the surveillance record, the DMV documentation, the PI billing records, and a 1-paragraph case summary referencing both the New Mexico and Nevada incidents with their original case numbers. The deputy looked at the envelope, looked at Logan, looked at the envelope again. "You put this together yourself?" he asked. "My people did," Logan said. "Your people," the deputy repeated in the tone of a man recalibrating something he thought he understood. "Is it useful?" Logan asked. The deputy opened the envelope, scanned the first page, and something moved across his face that wasn't quite professional neutrality. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, this is useful." But Voss was handcuffed at 7:31 a.m., standing on a dirt-shouldered county road in the Sonoran Desert in the full August heat that had already pushed past 94 degrees even before 8 o'clock. He kept his composure until the deputy guided him toward the patrol unit, and then he turned and looked back once, not at Logan, not at Mason, not at the deputies, at Emily. And Emily looked right back at him, steady as the desert around her, and she did not look away. He looked away first. The patrol car door closed. And Logan Ryder stood in the middle of a county road with 3 of his oldest friends and a 20-year-old nursing student he'd known for 19 days, and he let out a breath so slowly and so completely, it felt like something he'd been holding for a lot longer than 3 weeks. Travis came up beside him. "You all right?" "Getting there," Logan said. Emily was still looking at the patrol car. When it pulled away, she turned around and looked at Logan, and her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with crying, though she was doing that too, just a little at the corners. "It's over," she said. Logan considered the honest answer. He thought about the investigation that would follow the charges that might or might not stick the system that had failed twice before, and might yet find a way to complicate what seemed straightforward on a desert road. But he also thought about the envelope in the deputy's hands, the recording on Eric's phone, the 19 days of documentation, the 2 prior case numbers that investigators were already going to be pulling before noon. "The part where you look in the mirror every morning and see that car," Logan said. "That part's over." She nodded slowly. Then she looked down at the road for a moment, and when she looked up again, she was pulling herself together the way she'd been pulling herself together for weeks, quietly, stubbornly, with the particular internal toughness of someone who had learned early that the world didn't pause to let you finish falling apart. "I need to get to class," she said. Logan almost laughed. He didn't, but it was close. "Bus is still running," Mason said, nodding toward the yellow vehicle sitting 50 yards up the road, the driver standing outside with his arms folded, and the patient look of a man accustomed to unexpected delays. Emily picked up her backpack from where she'd set it on the ground when she stepped off the bus. She adjusted the strap. She took one more breath. Then she walked back toward the bus in the full heat of the Arizona morning, on a county road in the desert, like someone who had somewhere important to be. Which she did. She always had. The story broke before noon. Logan didn't find out from the news. He found out from his phone, which had been ringing continuously since about 10:30, in which he had been continuously not answering because he was under a Sportster that needed its primary chain adjusted and the phone could wait. It was Travis who finally walked over, picked up the phone from the workbench, looked at the screen and said, "Logan, it's on the news." Logan slid out from under the frame. His hands were black with grease. He took the phone from Travis and looked at the screen and saw the headline running across a local news station's breaking banner. Hells Angels member assists in apprehension of suspected serial stalker Tucson woman safe after 3-week ordeal. He set the phone face down on the workbench and went back to the Sportster. Travis stared at him. "That's it? That's your reaction?" "Chain's still loose," Logan said. "Logan?" "Travis, the chain is still loose." "Mitz." Travis picked up the phone and went back to his corner of the garage, and Logan heard him dialing someone, probably Eric, probably Mason, and the low murmur of conversation that followed. He let it go. He focused on the work under his hands, on the thing he could actually fix, on the clean mechanical problem with a clear mechanical solution. He had always been better with engines than with everything else, and right now everything else was very loud. The first knock on the bay door came 40 minutes later. It was a man Logan didn't recognize, mid-50s, thick through the middle, wearing a sun's cap and carrying a paper bag from the bakery 2 blocks down. He stood at the edge of the open bay with the look of someone who had walked to the door 3 times before actually knocking. "You Logan Ryder?" he asked. Logan looked up from the workbench. "Depends on who's asking." "I live on Camino Seco," the man said. "My daughter takes that same bus." He stopped, cleared his throat, set the paper bag down on the workbench without waiting for an invitation. "My wife made those. Pastries. She didn't know what else to do." Another pause. "Neither did I. But we wanted to say something." Logan looked at the bag, looked at the man. "Your daughter okay?" Logan asked. He never went after her specifically, I don't think, but she knew about the SUV. The kids on the bus knew. They all knew, and apparently they'd all been worried for weeks and didn't. The man stopped again, put his hand over his mouth for a second. When he moved it away, his voice was rougher. "They didn't know what to do either. And you did something." Logan said nothing for a moment, then, "Tell your daughter she can always knock." The man looked at him. "If something feels wrong," Logan said, "tell her she can knock on this door." The man nodded. He couldn't quite speak right away. He just nodded, and then he turned and walked back out to his car, and Logan watched him go, and then he opened the paper bag, looked at the pastries inside, and put the bag on the shelf above the coffee maker, where the guys could find it. Then he went back to the chain, or Nidio. The calls didn't stop. By 2 in the afternoon, Logan had 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, 6 from a local TV station, 2 from a radio show, and 1 from a number with a New Mexico area code that he stared at for a long time before putting the phone back down without calling it back. Not yet. He didn't know what that call was, but he had a feeling, and he wasn't ready for that feeling to be confirmed or denied while he was standing in a garage covered in grease. What he was not prepared for was Emily's mother. Her name was Sandra Carter, and she arrived at the garage at 3:47 p.m., driving a 10-year-old Honda with Nevada plates, which told Logan she had gotten in the car and started driving the moment Emily called her, before she'd even fully absorbed what she was being told. Sandra was a compact woman in her early 50s with Emily's same bone structure and Emily's same quality of contained toughness, and she walked into that garage the way women walk into spaces they've decided they have a right to be in, without hesitation, without apology. She looked at Logan for a moment before she spoke, not sizing him up exactly, more like trying to match what she was seeing against the thing her daughter had described, and finding that the two didn't contradict each other, which seemed to settle something in her. "My daughter told me you believed her," Sandra said, "from the first day." "First minute," Logan said. Sandra's jaw tightened, not at him, at everything else, at the weeks before Logan, at the 8 people who hadn't, at whatever she had been carrying in the car for the 4-hour drive from Nevada. "I told her she was stressed," Sandra said quietly. "I told her she was probably stressed from school and work, and that she should—" She stopped, started again. "She called me 6 times in 2 weeks, and I told her 6 times that she was imagining things." Logan set down his wrench. "She's not someone who panics," Sandra continued. "She never has been, not since she was small. Even when she was scared, she found a way to handle it. So when she kept calling and I kept thinking, if she can handle it, it can't be that bad. Right? Isn't that backwards? Isn't that exactly backwards? It is, Logan said plainly, but you're here now. 4 hours too late. 4 hours before it started to matter to you, Logan said, which means you'll be here for the part that matters most. Sandra looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were dry, but just barely. Which part is that? The part where she has to figure out who she is after, Logan said. The during part is fast. It's the after that takes time. Sandra was quiet. Then you've seen this before. Not this exactly, Logan said, but the shape of it, yeah. She nodded slowly the way people nod when they've received information they didn't want but needed. Then she pulled herself upright the way Emily pulled herself upright, that same internal reset, that same quiet reclamation of posture, and said, "Is she all right, honestly?" "Honestly," Logan said, "she's tough enough to be all right. That doesn't mean she will be immediately, but she's got the equipment." Sandra looked at him one more time and then she said something Logan didn't fully expect. "Thank you for seeing her," she said. "Not just for helping her, for seeing her." Logan picked his wrench back up and didn't say anything, which was the closest he had to a response that wouldn't embarrass both of them. The news cycle was not gentle, and it was not simple, and it was not finished by dinner. By 6 o'clock that evening, the story had spread from the local Tucson stations to the state wire, and by 8 it had been picked up nationally, at which point the version of events available to the general public had already diverged into two distinct and loudly argued narratives. The first narrative said a young woman had been saved from a predator by a community of people who paid attention when institutions failed. The second narrative said a group of outlaw bikers had taken the law into their own hands in a way that set a dangerous precedent in what happened to due process when private citizens started running their own operations. Both narratives were arguing at full volume simultaneously on every platform Logan did not use, and were being reported to him in real time by Travis, who did use those platforms and seemed to experience reading the arguments as a form of entertainment. "This guy in Phoenix says you should be in jail," Travis reported cheerfully, reading from his phone. Said Logan. "This woman in Albuquerque says you're the only real man left in America." "Also wrong," Logan said. "This one," Travis paused. "Okay, this one's interesting. This is a law professor from UA saying the documentation you handed the deputies was more complete than most professional investigative packages she's reviewed." Logan stopped what he was doing for exactly 2 seconds. Then he started again. "Don't let that get out," he said. "Eric will be insufferable." Toward him, Eric, sitting in this corner with his own phone, raised a hand without looking up. "Already saw it," he said. "Already insufferable." Mason, who had been unusually quiet all afternoon, looked up from the stool where he'd been sitting. "There's something else," he said. "I've been waiting to bring it up." Logan looked at him. "The New Mexico number," Mason said. "The one you didn't call back." Logan was quiet. "I know who it is," Mason said. "Or I think I do. I've been on the phone with some people this afternoon." He paused. "The woman from New Mexico, the one from the 2019 case. Her name is Rachel Fuentes. She's been trying to reach you since about 11 this morning." The garage went quiet. Logan set down his wrench for the second time that day. "How did she find the number?" he asked. "Emily," Mason said simply. Logan absorbed that. Emily had called Rachel Fuentes, or Rachel had found Emily. Either way, the two women who bookended Daniel Voss's pattern had already found each other, which was either the most natural thing in the world or the most surprising, depending on how you understood people and what they reached for when they finally felt safe enough to reach. "What does she want?" Logan asked. "To say something," Mason said. "That's all? Just to say something to someone who she thinks will understand." Logan looked at the New Mexico number on his phone for a long moment. Then he walked to the back of the garage, away from the others, and called it back. Rachel Fuentes answered on the first ring as if she'd been holding the phone. Yes, she was 30 years old now, she said. She'd been 22 when Daniel Voss had started following her. She taught high school chemistry in Albuquerque, had a dog, had an apartment she'd picked specifically because it had a doorman. She said all of this in the first 60 seconds, and Logan understood that she was giving him context, building him a picture of the life she'd rebuilt, because the next part required him to understand that she was not broken. that she had survived and constructed something solid from what remained. I withdrew from the case, she said. I know how that looks. I know why you did it, Logan said. A pause. Do you go? He made you understand that the system would move slower than he would, Logan said. He made you understand that even if the case succeeded, you'd spend a year and a half in a process that required you to stay still while he stayed free. And at the end of that process, you might win a piece of paper, and the piece of paper wouldn't keep him from getting in his car. Silence. Who told you that? Rachel asked quietly. Nobody, Logan said. That's just how it works. Another silence longer. Emily said you believed her immediately. Yes. Why? Logan thought about how to answer that. He thought about the answer that was biographical about the things he'd seen and done, and been part of that had given him a particular education in recognizing the difference between fear and drama, between a real threat and an imagined one. He thought about Mason's sister. He thought about the women in the files Eric had printed. He thought about the particular quality of Emily's face at the red light, the specific texture of the fear in it, the thing that you couldn't fake because it came from somewhere real and deep and sustained. Because her face looked exactly like yours probably did, Logan said, when you were trying to get someone to listen. Rachel didn't say anything for a moment. When she did speak, her voice was different, not emotional exactly, but the way a voice gets when emotion is present but being held carefully. He's going to try to get out of it, she said. His attorney is already talking to the DA. I saw it online. They're going to call the documentation irregularly obtained. They're going to say the setup was entrapment. They're going to make this about you instead of about him. I know, Logan said, and you're ready for that. Logan thought about the sealed envelope, the clean recording, the deputy's face when he'd opened the first page. The fact that Logan had made the call to the sheriff's dispatch before any of the confrontation, not after which, meant the timeline was documented, which meant the defense narrative of vigilante ambush had a factual problem. It was going to have a hard time arguing past. We didn't set a trap, Logan said. We identified a pattern and put ourselves where the pattern was going to lead. He got out of his car on his own. He walked toward that bus on his own. We just made sure there were witnesses when he did it. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Will you testify? She asked. If they need you to, yes, Logan said without hesitation. And your people, all of us. Another pause. I'll testify too, she said. I've been waiting 4 years to say something in a room where it would matter. I'd like to finally do that. Logan closed his eyes for just a second. Okay, he said. I'll make sure the DA knows you're available. And yet after he hung up, he stood into the back of the garage for a moment, phone in his hand, the muffled sounds of Travis and Eric debating something on the other side of the building drifting back to him. He thought about Rachel Fuentes at 22 watching a courtroom date approach and making the calculation that the math didn't add up, that the system moved too slowly and the man moved too freely, and choosing the only option that had felt like real protection, even if it looked like retreat. He thought about the woman in Nevada who had left a voicemail saying she just wanted it to stop. He thought about the gap between what the law promised and what it actually delivered to the people who needed it most and could afford it least. Then Travis called from the front, Logan, there's a TV crew outside. Logan walked back to the front of the garage. I shot them. He didn't talk to the TV crew. That decision was simple. Talking to cameras was talking to the version of the story he couldn't control, and there was still a legal process in motion that required the actual facts to remain cleaner than television tended to keep them. He sent Travis out to say they had no comment, and Travis delivered this message with his arms crossed and his full 6'2" presence, which communicated it with a clarity no words could have improved upon. The crew left. What Logan didn't anticipate was the woman who came around the side of the building 20 minutes later, not a journalist, not a camera in sight, just a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the particular purposeful walk of a person who had made a decision and was executing it before she could talk herself out of it. She knocked on the side door of the garage. Logan opened it. I live 4 houses down, she said. Miriam Okonkwo, I've complained about this garage twice to the city council in the past 3 years. Noise ordinance. She paused. I wanted you to know that I know that, and I'm telling you anyway because it seemed like the honest thing to do. Logan looked at her. Okay. My granddaughter is 17, Miriam said. She takes the bus to school every morning. I have been terrified for 3 years, not specifically of anything, just the general state of being a grandmother in the current world, you understand. And I watched the news today and I found out that for the past 3 weeks, while I was worrying in a general way about everything, there were actual men on this street paying specific attention to who was on that bus and whether they were safe. She stopped, adjusted the glasses on top of her head. I owe you a different kind of neighbor than I've been. Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed the door open a little wider. You want coffee? He asked. It's probably old. Miriam Okonkwo looked at the open door at the garage beyond it, at the man holding it open. She considered this for exactly 2 seconds. Yes, she said, I do. Tom. Emily came by at 7 that evening after her shift at the diner. Her mother was with her, which Logan had expected, and a woman he didn't recognize was with her mother, who turned out to be Sandra's college roommate, who had driven down from Flagstaff because Sandra had called her from the road, and she'd turned her own car around and come south, which was apparently the kind of friendship Sandra Carter had cultivated over a lifetime, and which explained Logan thought several things about where Emily had learned to reach for people when she needed them. But the garage was crowded in a way it almost never was. Miriam was still there with her second cup of old coffee. Travis and Eric were in the back, arguing about something. Mason was sitting on his bike eating one of the pastries from the morning. And Emily walked in and stopped and looked at all of it with an expression Logan couldn't quite name. Then she looked at Logan. It's always this chaotic, she asked. No, Logan said. This is worse than usual. She smiled. It was the first full smile he'd seen from her. Not the half smile she used when something was darkly funny, not the pulled together version she used when she was deciding not to cry, but an actual open smile that reached her eyes and stayed there for a moment. Rachel Fuentes called me, Emily said. About an hour ago. She said you two talked. We did. She said you asked the right questions. Emily looked at him steadily. She said nobody had ever asked her the right questions before. She meant it as a compliment. I know, Logan said. Emily set her backpack down on the stool, the same position as that first afternoon, 19 days ago. She sat down and she looked at Logan the way she'd looked at him from the very beginning, directly without performance, with the full weight of whatever she was thinking. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. That first morning at the light, you didn't know me. You didn't know if what I was saying was real. You didn't know anything about me except that I was scared and the bus was leaving. She paused. Why didn't you just let it go? Logan thought about that. He thought about the honest answer and the simple answer and whether they were the same answer. Because you asked, he said finally, and the asking cost you something. I could see it in your face. People who are imagining things, they ask for confirmation. People who are telling the truth ask for help. And you weren't asking if you were right. You were asking for someone to stand up with you. Emily looked at him for a long moment. That's what I was asking, she said quietly. I know, Logan said. Plus, the garage was loud around them, voices, the scrape of a stool, Mason laughing at something Eric said, and Logan was aware of all of it and none of it because the conversation in the middle of it felt like the quietest thing in the room. What happens now? Emily asked. With Voss, with the case. Charges are filed, Logan said. Rachel Fuentes is willing to testify. The Nevada DA's office called Eric this afternoon. They're reopening their case. The documentation package we gave the deputies is going to prosecutors in 3 states by end of week. He paused. It's going to be a process. Probably a long one, but the evidence is clean, and the witnesses are real, and the man has a documented history in 2 prior jurisdictions. That's not nothing. Well, Emily nodded slowly. And if his attorney finds a way to, then we deal with that when it happens, Logan said. But tonight, right now, he's in custody, and you went to class, and then you went to work, and then you came here. That's 3 things that happened today in the right order. She looked at him. Something in her expression softened just slightly. Not weakness, just the particular relaxation of a person who has been carrying something for so long that they've stopped noticing the weight until someone helps them set it down. 3 things in the right order, she repeated. It's a start, Logan said. And outside on Valencia Avenue, the evening traffic moved steadily south under the last orange light of the Arizona sunset. Inside the garage, Miriam Okonkwo was explaining to Travis with great conviction that his coffee technique was entirely wrong And Travis was listening with an expression of genuine concentration that Logan had never seen him direct at anything mechanical. Sandra Carter was standing near the back talking to her friend, and at one point she laughed, really laughed, the kind that surprised her, and Logan caught the sound of it and understood it for what it was. Not relief exactly, but the first breath after relief, the breath that means the body is beginning to believe that the danger is actually past. Emily stayed for almost 2 hours. When she left, she stopped at the door and turned around. "Same bus tomorrow," she said. "Same bus tomorrow," Logan agreed. She walked out. Sandra and her friend followed, and there was a moment at the door where Sandra paused and looked back at Logan one more time, and she gave him a nod that carried more weight than any word she could have chosen, and he returned it the same way. Miriam left at 9, having reorganized the coffee maker situation to her satisfaction, and left explicit written instructions on a notepad she produced from her purse, which she set on the shelf with the authority of someone who intended to return and check. Travis locked up at 10. Eric drove his truck back toward Marana headlights, sweeping out into the desert dark. Mason sat on his bike for a few minutes before starting it, the way he sometimes did when something was settling in him and he needed to sit with it before moving. And Logan stood in the bay alone in the quiet that came after a full garage emptied out, and he thought about Rachel Fuentes in New Mexico agreeing to testify after 4 years of silence, and the woman in Nevada who had just wanted it to stop, and the bus rolling past this spot every morning at 7:10, carrying kids who were just trying to get somewhere. He thought about the pastries on the shelf. He thought about Miriam Okonkwo's instructions for the coffee maker. He thought about Emily Carter walking back to that bus on a county road in the desert with her backpack on and her class to get to. He turned off the light, locked the bay, and walked back inside. Tomorrow was another morning and the bus would come through at 7:10, same as always. But something about tomorrow felt different from every morning that had come before it, and Logan Ryder, who had spent a lifetime being the person decent people crossed the street to avoid, let himself notice that just for a moment before the night settled in around the garage on Valencia Avenue, and the city went quiet. The morning after Logan was outside at 6:55, he hadn't planned to be. He told himself the night before that things were different now that the reason he'd been standing at the edge of his lot every morning for 3 weeks no longer existed, that the black SUV was in an impound lot and its driver was in a Pima County holding cell, working through the first stages of a process that was going to take considerably longer than a Thursday morning to resolve. He told himself all of that, and then at 6:54, he'd found himself walking toward the bay door with his coffee, and he'd stopped pretending there was any version of this morning where he wasn't going to be outside when that bus came through. Some habits form because they have to. They don't stop just because the emergency does. The bus came at 7:11, 1 minute late, which was unusual. Logan watched it come down Valencia the way he'd watched it every morning for 3 weeks, and something in his chest did a thing he didn't have a precise word for. Not relief, not pride, something quieter than both of those and more durable. The bus slowed at the light. Logan stood with his coffee. And then the narrow side window near the front of the bus slid open about 3 inches, and a hand came through, and Emily Carter waved at him from inside the moving bus, the way you wave at someone you know is going to be where you expected them to be. Logan raised his coffee cup. The light turned green. The bus moved on. And Logan Ryder stood on the edge of his lot on Valencia Avenue and watched it go. And the morning felt different from every morning that had come before it, and he let himself notice that this time without talking himself out of it. The legal process moved the way legal processes move, not fast, not clean, but forward. The Pima County DA's office filed charges against Daniel Voss within 48 hours, stalking criminal surveillance and harassment, with additional charges pending review of the materials found on Voss's laptop and phone, which the detective assigned to the case described to Logan in a phone call Logan hadn't expected to receive as, and these were the detective's exact words, significantly worse than what we initially anticipated. Logan didn't ask him to elaborate. He didn't need to. The fact that a detective was calling him at all voluntarily with an update told him something meaningful about how the department was choosing to frame its relationship with what had happened on that county road. "The documentation you provided was thorough," the detective said. His name was Ramos, and he had the careful voice of a man who chose his words with precision. "I've been doing this work for 14 years, and I want to be honest with you. It was more thorough than some of what we put together internally. Eric's detail-oriented, Logan said. A pause. Your associate with the DMV contact. We didn't break any laws getting that information, Logan said. I know, Ramos said. That's not why I'm calling. Another pause. I'm calling because I looked up those prior cases. New Mexico and Nevada. I spent most of yesterday on the phone with investigators in both states. His voice changed, slightly tightened the way voices tighten when something has genuinely gotten under a person's skin and they've decided not to pretend otherwise. The pattern was there. The documentation from both previous investigations was solid. Both cases should have gone the distance. They didn't, Logan said. No, Ramos said. They didn't. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you the system worked in those cases because it didn't. What I will tell you is that it's going to work in this one. A beat. I'm going to make sure of it personally. Logan was quiet for a moment. Then Rachel Fuentes is willing to testify. I know, she called our office this morning. Another pause. She sounds like someone who's been waiting a long time to say something. She has, Logan said. Don't waste it. He hung up and stood in the back of the garage, and he thought about Rachel Fuentes at her desk in Albuquerque. Phone in hand, calling a DA's office for the second time in her life, this time knowing that on the other end of the line, someone had already decided to listen. He thought about what that phone call felt like from her side, and it was one of the better things he'd thought about in a long time. The community didn't change overnight. That wasn't how communities worked, and Logan was old enough and honest enough not to expect it. But it changed. The woman who ran the coffee cart near the corner of Valencia and Ajo had always been pleasant to Logan in the transactional way that people are pleasant to customers they would prefer not to think too much about. Her name was Donna, and she had been working that corner for 7 years, and in 7 years she had never once used Logan's name. She called him the way service workers do when they want to be warm without being specific. The Monday after the news broke, Donna handed him his coffee and said, "Good morning, Logan." Just that, his name. Clear and direct with no performance around it, like a door opening that had been stuck for 7 years and had simply decided to move. Logan paid for his coffee and said, "Morning, Donna." She smiled. He walked back to the garage. It was small, it was enormous. It was both of those things at the same time. Travis, who observed everything from the bay door, said nothing until Donna was out of earshot and then said 7 years. I know, Logan said, 7 years and she never said your name. I know, Travis. I've been coming here for 4 years and she still calls me hun. That'll probably take another few weeks, Logan said and went inside. Miriam Okonkwo came back on Tuesday as Logan had suspected she would to verify that the coffee maker instructions had been followed. They had been mostly, and she updated them based on new information she had acquired, apparently between Sunday and Tuesday evening. She also brought a tin of her own cookies, which she set on the same shelf as the earlier pastry bag, and then she sat down on the stool near the workbench and watched Logan work for about 10 minutes in complete silence before saying, "My husband used to do this." Logan glanced up. "Work on bikes. Sit in a garage and think," she said. He said it was the only place where his mind went quiet. She looked around at the space, not judgmentally, just with the particular attention of a person revisiting a decision they'd made and finding the original data incomplete. "I complained about the noise for 3 years. I never once thought about who was making it or why." Logan set down his wrench. "What happened to your husband?" "Stroke," she said, 4 years ago. She said it plainly, the way people say things they have finished grieving, but not finished carrying. "He would have liked you," she added. "He was not a man who needed people to be simple." Logan picked his wrench back up. "Tell your granddaughter the standing offer still applies." Miriam looked at him. "What offer?" "She can knock on this door," Logan said. "If something feels wrong, any of the kids on this street, anytime." Miriam was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had the particular quality of someone trying to keep it ordinary and not quite managing. "I'll tell her," she said. The twist that nobody had anticipated, including Logan, came on a Wednesday afternoon 11 days after the arrest. Emily called him at 2:17 p.m. She was not at class. He could tell immediately from the background silence that she was somewhere alone, and from the quality of her breathing that whatever she was about to say had been sitting with her for a while. The Nevada woman contacted me, Emily said. Logan set down what he was holding. The one who left the voicemail. Her name is Carla Reyes, Emily said. She's been following the case online. She found me through Rachel, I think, or through the news. I'm not totally sure. She called me this morning. A pause. She left Nevada 2 years ago. She's been living in Portland under her married name. She said she hasn't told her husband about Voss. She hasn't told anyone. She said she built a whole new life around not telling anyone. Emily stopped. What does she want? Logan asked. She wants to testify, Emily said. She said, and I'm reading this because I wrote it down, she said, I spent 2 years building walls around what happened to me, and I just watched a 20-year-old woman on the news refuse to build any walls at all, and I think I've been wrong about what survival means. Emily's voice caught slightly on the last few words. She steadied it. She wants Detective Ramos's number. Logan closed his eyes for a second. 3 women, 2 prior cases. A man who had built his entire methodology on the certainty that women would eventually go quiet, eventually disappear, eventually choose the life they could still build over the fight they didn't think they could win. A man who had been wrong about all of them, just on a delay. I'll text you Ramos's direct line, Logan said. Logan, Emily paused. She said something else. She said, tell whoever stood up with her that I needed someone like that too. I just ran out of people before I found them. The garage was very quiet. Logan thought about saying something. He ran through several options. All of them felt inadequate to the specific weight of what Carla Reyes had said from Portland, from behind the walls she'd built through a phone call to a woman she'd never met. Tell her she found them, Logan said. Late but present. He heard Emily write that down. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Rachel Fuentes booked her flight from Albuquerque the day the date was announced. Carla Reyes told her husband the full story, apparently in a single 2-hour conversation, that Logan only knew about because Emily told him afterward, and Emily only knew because Carla had called her immediately after crying in a way she described as the kind of crying that feels like setting something down that you've been carrying so long you forgot it had weight. No. Voss's defense attorney filed 2 motions in the first 10 days. The first argued that the documentation Logan's group had provided was obtained through methods that constituted illegal surveillance. The DA's office responded with a 20-page brief pointing out, among other things, that observing a public road from a private parking lot was not illegal surveillance in any jurisdiction the defense attorney was going to be able to cite. The motion was denied in 4 days, which was Ramos told Logan in a brief call, unusually fast. The second motion argued entrapment, that Logan and his associates had manufactured a situation designed to lure Voss into behavior he would not otherwise have exhibited. The DA's office responded by noting that Voss had been exhibiting that behavior, documented for 19 consecutive days prior to the Thursday in question, and that what Logan's group had done was position themselves as witnesses to a pattern that was already fully established. The motion was still pending, but Ramos's tone on the phone suggested he was not losing sleep over it. Mason, when Logan told him about the entrapment motion, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, they're trying to make this about us. They always try to make it about us, Logan said. That's the play. We're easier to argue about than their client is. Does it work? Logan thought about the clean recording, the 19 days of time-stamped photographs, the prior case numbers in 2 states, the private investigators' billing records, the fact that Voss had gotten out of his car and walked toward that bus under his own power, with no one within 30 feet of him before a single engine had turned over. Not this time, Logan said. 5 weeks after the arrest, something happened that Logan would think about for a long time afterward. He was inside the garage on a Thursday morning when he heard something that took him a moment to identify. Voices, more than one from the direction of the lot. He came out and found 3 women standing near the bay door. None of them people he recognized. One was in her 30s, one looked about Emily's age, and one was older, maybe 60, with the careful posture of a person who had made a significant effort to be somewhere. The older woman spoke first. We're not from this neighborhood, she said. We drove from the east side, we saw the news, and then we saw the follow-up stories, and my daughter, she gestured to the younger woman, suggested we come. She paused. My granddaughter has been dealing with something, a situation, a man who lives near her school. She paused again. We've reported it twice. We've been told twice that there's no actionable evidence. Logan looked at the three of them for a moment. The younger woman was holding her phone tight the way Emily had held her backpack strap. The older woman had her chin up in a way that suggested this trip had cost her something, and she had decided to spend it anyway. "Come in, Ma," Logan said. "Mom," he put the coffee on. The three women sat down on the stools near the workbench, and Logan Ryder listened to what they had to say the way he'd been listening to hard things all his life, completely without interruption, without the kind of face that made people feel they needed to edit themselves. When the granddaughter finished talking, the garage was quiet for a moment. Then Logan picked up his phone and called Ramos. "I've got 3 people here," he said. "You should hear this." That became the shape of the weeks that followed. Not dramatic, not the kind of thing that made the news twice. Just the steady accumulation of small moments that communities build themselves from. When something shifts in them, the coffee, by name the tin of cookies, Miriam's notepad instructions, the 3 women from the east side, the knock on the bay door that started happening with enough regularity that Travis put a proper chair near the side entrance. Emily came by twice a week, sometimes more. She never needed a reason. She'd stop in after class or after a shift at the diner and sit on the stool near the workbench and talk about her program, about the professors who were good and the ones who weren't, about the particular challenges of learning to draw blood from a person who was scared. Which was, she said, mostly about making your own calm available to them before you asked anything of their body. Logan thought that was one of the better things he'd heard about nursing. One afternoon, she came in and sat down and didn't say anything for a while, which was also something she'd started to be comfortable enough to do. After a few minutes, she said, "I've been thinking about the other women, Rachel and Carla, about what would have happened if someone had stood up with them the first time." Logan kept working. "Don't do that math," he said. "It doesn't lead anywhere useful." "I know," she said. "I do it anyway." "Most people do," Logan said. "The trick is knowing when to put it down." She was quiet again. "Then when do you put yours down?" Logan set his wrench on the bench. He thought about that honestly, about the things he carried that he'd learned to set down, and the ones he hadn't, about the particular weight of knowing you've been part of bad things and the different weight of choosing differently. "When I've done something with them," he said, "that's the only thing that actually works. You can't outthink it or outweight it. You have to do something with it." Emily looked at him steadily. "That's what you were doing," she said. "That morning at the light. You were doing something with it." Logan didn't answer that. He picked his wrench back up. But he didn't say she was wrong. The bus came through every morning at 7:10, same as always. And every morning Logan was outside. Not because he had to be anymore. Not because there was a black SUV to track, or a pattern to monitor, or a plan to execute. Just because the morning had reorganized itself around that moment, and he had let it, and it turned out that letting it felt more like something gained than something lost. Emily waved every time, without fail. The narrow window, the hand 3 seconds of contact as the bus moved through the intersection, and then the bus going on, and Emily going to her class and her life and the future she was building one difficult, deliberate day at a time. Logan always raised his coffee cup. Cái thành phố vẫn thấy một người đàn ông biker đầy hình xăm đứng một mình trên vỉa hè với tách cà phê, and some of them had started to understand that what they were actually seeing was something else entirely. A man who had been listening for the knock on the door before anyone knocked. A man who had understood at some foundational level that no amount of reputation or rumor could touch that being the person everyone feared, and being the person who showed up for the people who needed it most were not contradictions. They were sometimes exactly the same thing. Rachel Fuentes testified at the preliminary hearing on a Tuesday morning in late October. She flew in the night before, and Logan met her at the garage, and they drank old coffee and talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with Daniel Voss, about Albuquerque, about chemistry students, about the particular satisfaction of watching something hard become clear to someone who'd been struggling with it. She was sharp and funny and tired in a way that was working its way toward done. And when she left the next morning for the courthouse, she looked like someone walking towards something rather than away from it, which was different and which mattered. Carla Reyes testified by video from Portland. Her husband sat beside her during the deposition off camera, But she told Emily afterward that she could feel his hand on the back of her chair the entire time, and that it was the first time she'd said any of it out loud in a room where someone who loved her could hear it, and that the two things, the testimony and the hand on the chair, had done something to each other that she didn't have words for yet. Daniel Voss did not look at any of the three women when they spoke. He looked at the table. He looked at it for a long time, and Logan Ryder, who was not in that courtroom, who was in his garage on Valencia Avenue, doing what he always did, working on an engine that needed attention, drinking coffee that had been sitting too long, didn't need to be there to know how it went. Because Ramos called at 4:47 p.m. and said two words before anything else: charges held. Logan set his wrench down. Outside, Valencia Avenue moved in its ordinary way, cars, the distant sound of the school bus brakes at the light, the everyday noise of a city that didn't know or care what had just been decided in a Tucson courtroom. The world didn't pause. It never did. But Logan stood still for a moment in the middle of his garage in the life he had built from things most people wouldn't have touched, and he let the two words land: charges held. And three women who had been told in different ways by different people that their fear was not a sufficient reason for the system to move. Those three women had walked into a room and said what happened, and the room had believed them. And the man who had built his entire operation on the certainty that rooms like that never would, was going to have to find out what it felt like when the math finally stopped working in his favor. Logan picked his wrench back up. There was still work to do. There always was. And tomorrow morning at 7:10, the bus would come through, and Emily Carter would wave, and Logan Ryder would be exactly where he always was, coffee in hand, vest on, standing at the edge of the lot on Valencia Avenue in the full Arizona light, exactly the person everyone thought he was, and also something more. Because the most dangerous thing in Tucson wasn't a man with a patch on his back and a history people whispered about. The most dangerous thing in Tucson was a man who had decided once and for all that the knock on the door would never go unanswered. Not on his street, not on his watch, not ever again.